I have a question for you. Have you ever researched your family history and found a branch of your family that started out maybe in the eastern United States? And next thing you know, they're living in the western part of the United States, and you don't know when, where, why they did that? I found that in my own family. My great great grandfather, who I thought lived his whole life in Ohio, had a birthplace of Kansas. And I didn't know why that happened. As far as I knew, he was always in Ohio. His parents were in Ohio. Really threw me off. Well, it turns out the federal land records at the National Archives helped me answer that question as to why was he born in Kansas when he lived his whole life in Ohio. And you know what? They could do the same for you. You may have family members in the federal land records that you might not even know about. There are some amazing records at the National Archives related to federal land. These are documents that could help fill in the gaps in your ancestor's story. Maybe explain why did your ancestors start out in the eastern US and they now lived in the western US. If you're not using federal land records in your research, you could potentially be missing out on entire chapters of your family history. I hear from people all the time. They email me because they just found their ancestors in this federal land index and they're all excited. And they ask me, what kind of records can I expect to get in these federal land documents at the National Archives? And you know what? It's a hard question to answer. There's no really one size fits all answer to that question. There's a lot of different ways that our ancestors could have gotten land from the federal government, a lot of different categories of federal land. In fact, if you look through here right now, you can see as I'm scrolling dozens and dozens of federal land categories that your ancestor may have gotten land from. To tell you about all of them, it's going to take hours. We're going to focus on the three main categories of federal land that you're more likely to find your ancestors in. That's going to be the homestead records, the military bounty warrants, and the cash sale entries. Let's answer that obvious question first, though. What is this land index that I keep talking about? Where do you find it? Well, it's on the Bureau of Land Management website, also known as the General Land Office. Most of the federal land transactions are indexed on this website, going back all the way to the early 1800s. And the great thing is, they're indexed by name. You can put your ancestor's name in there and see if he shows up. You could just put a last name and see if they're showing up in the federal land index. I do want to let you know, though, some of you may be familiar with this website already. Maybe you've poked around on there and found your people in there, and you clicked right here where it says patent image. There's more to this than what you're seeing right there. The patent is like the land deed, and it's the final step in the process. The previous steps in the process to getting that federal land, those are the documents that are at the National Archives. So if all you're seeing is this patent image and you have not pursued the rest of it, you're missing out. There are documents at the National Archives with your ancestor's name on it that go along with this transaction. So don't stop there. The first category of land that you're more likely to find your ancestors' records in would be the homestead files. The history of the Homestead Act is that it was passed during the Civil War. It was an effort to encourage settlement primarily west of the Mississippi. There were some southern lands included in there, some outlying states east of the Mississippi. Primarily, homestead land was going to be west of the Mississippi. If a settler moved out to this new area, filed the application, paid the application fee, stayed there for 5 years, made the necessary improvements, documented all of it, they could get that land free of charge. Usually it was 160 acres. There are a lot of people that attempted this homestead process, and the estimates are only about 40% of them successfully completed it, which means more than half of them turned around, gave up, and went back home for various reasons. So if your ancestor is in this index, that means they completed the process and they beat the odds. You're going to know you have a homesteader because when you look right here on the index, it's going to say homestead. And if you find a homestead entry, you definitely want to pursue getting the actual records from the National Archives. Homestead packets average right around 20 pages or so, and they contain some really interesting details about your family, about the land, what their life was like. You're likely to get a description of the land. How many acres was it? Where was it located? What kind of improvements did he make to that land in that 5-year process? You may very well find information about how big was the house that he built? How many rooms did it have? Did he build a stable? Did he have fencing? Did he grow crops on his land? How many acres did he use for the crops? How big was that stable? Some pretty interesting details about your ancestor's life there in this new area. You're likely to get testimony from his neighbors who are saying, yeah, I know him. This is when he moved there. He's been here for 5 years continuously. Or if he moved away from the land, this is why. So you're going to get details from people that knew your ancestor. One cool thing about these homestead packets that some people don't realize is in order to be eligible to get homestead land, you had to be an American citizen, or at least be in the process of becoming naturalized. So it's not uncommon to find naturalization papers in these documents. If your ancestor was born outside of the US and you know that he was a homesteader, you need to pursue this. You may find naturalization records there. Another thing that people don't realize is there was another provision in that law that said if you were a Union soldier in the Civil War, you could count your time in the Union Army against that 5-year period. So if you served 2 years in the Union Army, you only had to do 3 years on your homestead land before you got the land free of charge. And no, they didn't do this for Confederates. It only applied to Union soldiers. So what this means for you is if you have a Civil War soldier that you know moved away after the Civil War, you should check to see if he has a homestead packet. If he does, there may be Civil War paperwork in that packet because they needed to verify that they really were in the war for the length of time that they were claiming. Those papers should be in that packet. The next category of land that you're more likely to find your ancestors in would be the military bounty warrants. Now, there were several bounty land acts that were passed all throughout the 1800s that gave free land to veterans of various wars from 1790 to 1855. Those are the ones that are going to be indexed in this Bureau of Land Management Index. If you notice those years, 1790 is after the Revolutionary War. So the Revolutionary War bounty warrants, for the most part, are not included in this index. There are a couple scattered ones in there, but the Revolutionary War bounty land system was an entirely different process, and it is not included in this index. 1855 means this was before the Civil War, so Civil War soldiers were not entitled to bounty land, so you will not find anything having to do with Civil War bounty land anywhere at the federal level, including on this index. When you open these packets, you can find all kinds of things in there. If it's a soldier from the War of 1812 or maybe one of the Indian Wars, you're likely to find one of these really big, colorful certificates in there. Look at this. How cool is that to find your ancestor on this document? They printed this in color in the 1850s. It's amazing. Now, one thing that throws people off is they look at this and they say, well, the bounty land says it was in Iowa. My family was from Pennsylvania. I know they never moved to Iowa. This can't be him. But I want to say, don't rule it out. And here's why. Let's use the War of 1812 as an example here. A young soldier from the War of 1812 was maybe born in the 1790s. By the time these bounty land acts were passed in the 1850s, that soldier is going to be late 50s, 60s, if not older, by the time they got this bounty land. A lot of them, they didn't want to pack up, start over again in this brand new area. So they just sold it off right away. This certificate served as kind of like a gift certificate that someone could go to the land office and redeem it for the amount of acres that is shown. So a lot of times you find the soldiers just selling these certificates off to someone maybe younger in the community or a land speculator, someone who maybe was looking for a new adventure and wanted to settle in one of these Western states. On the backside of these warrants, you're going to find documentation of who purchased this warrant. And you need to pay attention to the witnesses on this transaction. Sometimes you may find a familiar name on there, a last name that you recognize, such as maybe a family member, a cousin, a brother-in-law. You never know who's going to show up on there, but pay attention to those. Now, you know that you have a military bounty warrant because when you search for the name, it's going to be the little MW at the beginning. That stands for military warrant. Also, when you open up the index entry, you're going to see what says right here, Scrip Warrant Act. Previously, we looked there and we saw Homestead. In this case, you want to look where it says Scrip Warrant Act. Those are bounty land warrants. Your ancestor may show up in here as the soldier himself. He also might show up as the one that purchased the warrant and went out and settled the land. You want to pay attention to the little P and the little W. The little P stands for patentee. The little W stands for warranty. The warranty is the one that the warrant was issued to. That would be the soldier himself. The patentee is the one that actually took the certificate, the warrant, and settled the land. You may find your soldier showing up as the warranty or the patentee. Just because his name is on here does not mean he was a soldier. It might mean he just bought somebody else's warrant. One more thing to keep in mind. If your ancestor got a military bounty warrant, he most likely would have had to have applied for it. They didn't just give these out to people. You had to apply for it first. So if you see your soldier showing up as a warranty, you want to take the extra step, look to see, is there an application? The applications are not indexed on this site, and they're most likely not going to be in the bounty warrant packets, but they're probably going to be at the National Archives. So make sure you take that extra step and look for the application as well. The final category of land that you're more likely to find your people in would be the cash sale entries. Cash sale entry usually means that someone showed up to the land office with cash in hand, paid for the land, and got the land patent right there on site. Sometimes these can be the most straightforward type of land transactions. The ones from before the Civil War tend to be in smaller ones, maybe 2, 3, 4 pages. They typically serve as receipts for the transaction. What I love about these cash sale entries is that in a lot of cases, this represents a defining moment in our ancestors' lives. This is the moment they arrived at the land office and purchased their land. In a lot of cases, it was a new start in a new state, a new area with new people. They may have been brand new landowners. So much went into this. There was the decision to pack up and move, the journey there, the money they spent on the land. These small but mighty files, they represent that moment in their lives, the potential that awaited them now that they had arrived on their new land. Another reason these are worth pursuing, the ones in the later 1800s tend to be a lot thicker. They're not just 2 or 3, 4 pages long. They tend to be entire packets. Also, sometimes a cash sale entry is not just a cash sale entry. At the beginning of this, when I mentioned my ancestor, who, as far as I knew, always lived in Ohio, but he had that birthplace of Kansas. And I mentioned that the federal land records helped me figure it out. Turns out his parents had a cash sale entry on file at the National Archives. One of the first times I went to the National Archives, I requested that packet. Inside there, it kind of confused me because it was labeled as a cash sale entry, but there were homestead papers inside of there, documenting the beginning of the homestead process. What happened was his parents moved out there to Kansas from Ohio, filed the beginning paperwork of the homestead process. A couple years in, they gave up, decided to turn around and come back home, paid cash for the land, got the patent to the land, and I think they just sold it off right away, pocketed the money, then moved back to Ohio. My ancestor was born in that couple-year time period when they were in Kansas. So his census entries always said Kansas, even though he lived the vast majority of his life in Ohio. That's not all that uncommon either. That's why I say if it's a cash sale entry, I would still pursue it because you never know what you're going to find inside of there. So how can we help you get these records in your hands? I'm glad you asked. On our website, there's an order form. You can go there. You can submit your order for the federal land records, include the URL of the land entry or just a screenshot, whichever you prefer. What you will get are full color, high resolution scans of all the images delivered right to your inbox. All of our rates are quicker and cheaper than if you had ordered directly from the National Archives. The National Archives, if you order through their website, they're going to charge you $50 for one of these federal land packets. Our rates, we charge $30 for each of these. We try to make them a little more affordable. So I want to encourage you, go to the Bureau of Land Management Index. Look for your ancestors in there. And if you find them in there, feel free to reach out and we can help you get those records in your hands.